What is up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm Jacob Turner. He's THI publisher Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here for another episode of This Week in the ACC, Week 4 edition of this series, and some interesting matchups to cover in this one. Before we dive into it, though, big thank you to our sponsor on this podcast. You guys know who they are. That's Underdog Fantasy. Links in the description below. We will talk about them a little bit later on in the show. So, of course, as always, stay tuned for that. But AJ, looking at the slate this week, we've got 9 games total and 5 conference matchups this weekend. Is Carolina starting off ACC play, and some other people as well starting off ACC play this weekend. So let's split it like this. We'll go through the first 5 games, and then we'll go through the final 4 games, like what I did there after that. So I'm going to go ahead
Let's do non-conference first.
We'll do non-conference first. Okay. I like that. Switching up the order a little bit. We'll do non-conference matchups.
So I can bash the league on its stupid scheduling.
Yeah. And not the most, I will preface it before I go into it.
I want to hear that.
Yeah. Not the most exciting non-conference matchups this weekend. I'll go ahead and run through the 4 matchups that are non-conference games. Though, you get Army at Syracuse on Saturday. That's a noon kickoff. Virginia Tech at Marshall, another noon kickoff, followed by number 18 Duke playing at UConn, 3:30 p.m. kickoff, and then 20th ranked Miami playing at Temple to wrap up the non-conference slate this weekend. So those opponents again: Army, Marshall, UConn, and Temple. 3 of those games being on the road. The only home game non-conference is Syracuse and Army. So again, you mentioned it, not the most exciting non-conference slate this weekend. Is there really anything the league's going to gain from playing these games? Because to me, it just seems like, especially when you look at 2 ranked teams playing in these, the only thing it's going to do is hurt you if you lose any of these matchups, right? I mean, that's the only way I can really look at those 4 games.
I've got no problem with them playing these games. I just have a problem with them playing them on the road. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't have to. There's no reason for Virginia Tech to go to Huntington.
Mm-hmm.
None. Just like there was no reason for Wake to go to Norfolk last week. Now, I can sort of buy going to UConn because UConn was once in a power conference and it's an independent. You've got to play on the road every once in a while, I guess. But in order to get them to come to your place, you have to go there. I get that. So I can sort of understand going to UConn. I don't understand Miami going to Temple at all.
Yeah, what like?
It doesn't make any sense.
You playing against in front of 50 people. You know what I mean? It's just
they don't draw at all.
Yeah,
you got nothing to gain. It's like when Carolina went to Georgia State last year. Brandon P covered the game with me, and we see Carolina coming out and doing their warm-ups and stuff. I said, that's quite an undertaking to get a football team, a program, and all the people that are attached to it and fly them somewhere to play a game on the road when you got no business playing there in the first place.
Exactly.
And in Virginia Tech's case, I'm sure they bused them to Huntington. Maybe they flew. I don't know. Probably bust.
I would think so.
It's like four buses.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen when teams come in football, when they get the police escort, there's like 4 buses. It's a lot.
Oh, it's a ton.
So the league didn't get much out of this. The ACC teams have, for years, they've gone to MAC schools and played. I remember somebody played in New Mexico State one year. Why would you uproot your whole program and fly to Las Cruces to play a game?
I don't get that one either.
Now, if you're going to go play a Mountain West school, I'm okay with that, or a Power 5 school. Some American conference schools, I think you can play. I'm not sure Temple's one of them. Doesn't do anything, doesn't move the needle. And like you said, these games only affect you if you lose.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to win. I guess after the weekend of the ACC sweeps in those games was, hey, they picked up 3 road wins. Because road wins are hard to get.
Who it's against. Yeah, you're just like, yeah.
And I do think if Virginia Tech wins at Marshall, that'd be an impressive win for Virginia Tech because they're not any good.
No,
they got thumped by Rutgers last week. They're not very good. The Commonwealth Cup is going to be a disaster this year when the Hokies and Wahoos play. Where they could be the 2 worst teams in the league.
Very well might be.
Mm-hmm. The Wahoos are.
Mm-hmm.
You said before we started recording, Wahoo's probably the worst Power 5 team in college football. They may not win a game this year.
No.
Of course, watching B State this weekend. So
yeah, man, Friday. Yeah, that's the matchup we'll talk about.
I just don't. I'm okay with Syracuse playing Army. You got to have those games. Syracuse has already played at Purdue. They played Western Michigan at home, which is a representative program from the MAC. Although it appears they're down this year, but Syracuse thumped them. So now they get Army. That's fine. They had a road game at a Big Ten team. That's fine. Go ahead and play Army. I got no problem with that at all. Mm-hmm. It's the other three I have a problem with.
Yeah.
There's no way Miami can't get Temple to come to South Florida and not have a return game.
Yeah, I don't get that one. Again, I don't get especially from a Miami perspective. And even, again, the Marshall and Virginia Tech one's a little different. Army at Syracuse, I don't mind. It's a home game for Syracuse. But the UConn and the at Temple matchups, I don't really see what you have to.
I can understand UConn a little bit. But
it's a program that's just notoriously horrible. You know what I mean? So it got a little bit better.
They were good. They were good for a while, and then they just got wretched. But they're better now. They went to a bowl game last year.
Yeah, on the up and up. But don't think they moved the needle. I don't think Duke at UConn moves any type of needle at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean. But I guess Duke figures it's got to play a road game. So, I mean, got to go play on the road and go play there because it's
now if that's a basketball.
I do think Duke has to play well to win. Mm-hmm. But Duke should move to 4-0.
Yeah,
Syracuse should move to 4-0. The ACC's got 7 teams that are 3-0 right now.
I know.
And if you look at the schedule, off the top of my head, I do all 7 play this weekend?
I'd have to count. Let's see.
Well, you've got Syracuse plays.
Mm-hmm.
We just talked about that. Duke, that's 3. Carolina, that's 4. Florida State, that's 5. Louisville plays, that's 6.
There's 14 conference teams play this week. Yep.
Okay, so all 7 play and all 7 can win. They could have 7 teams that are 4-0 next week. In fact, when you look at it right now, all 7 are probably favored, right?
Yeah, I don't have the lines in front of me, but I would when you look at the matchups and who's playing who, I don't know in how all 7 of those teams wouldn't be favored against who they're matching up against. No, there's no way they wouldn't be. So yeah, that is one, I guess, positive to look at from a league perspective.
The league has had a good start, and losses in any of these games would be bad. Even Virginia Tech losing at Marshall would be a bad look.
Mm-hmm.
It would hurt the league. So they got to take care of business. Win by 1, get a safety with 30 seconds left and get out of there with that.
Yeah, get the heck out of there.
Kick a field goal and win 3-2, get the heck out of there and get a win, and that's okay. But if you lose 3-2, that's an embarrassment. So
no, you don't. Yeah,
they have to win those games, obviously.
They do. I think that'll be a tough matchup for the Hokies, like you said, especially having to go up there. So, AJ, real quickly, before we move into the conference slate, I want to talk about Underdog Fantasy a little bit more. And, guys, we're super excited to be partnered with Underdog Fantasy. We decided to partner with Underdog Fantasy because they're the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. It's the easiest place to play fantasy sports as well. Have so much to offer, including their pick'em game. And in this game, you pick whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total in this week's game for a chance to win big. Super easy to play. All you have to do is pick 2 to 5 stats of your favorite players, choose whether they'll go higher or lower in their games, and you can 20x your money by going just 5 for 5. Also have a Best Ball Mania, which is awesome. Sweet game. If you think you know football, you got to check this one out. $15 million in total prizes up for grabs with this Best Ball Mania game this year. Winner takes home $3 million. Not a bad chunk of change right there to have in your pocket off playing some fantasy sports. So sign up today using promo code HEEL. That's HEEL. Get your first deposit up to get your first deposit doubled, if I can talk, up to $100. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com. You can also find them in the App Store. And don't forget to register with the promo code HEEL to get your first deposit, again, doubled up to $100. Must be 18 plus and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms do apply. If you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-522-4700 or visit ncpgambling.org. Big thank you for Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this show. Links in the description below. Like to make it nice and easy for you guys. And a reminder, use that promo code HEEL when you sign up. All right, AJ, let's dive into the conference matchups. I'll run through those real quickly. You got NC State at Virginia to open up the weekend slate. That's a Friday night game in Charlottesville, 7:30 p.m. kickoff, followed by Florida State at Clemson. Really, really intriguing matchup there, especially with that one being in Death Valley, noon kickoff between those two teams. Moving on, you've got Boston College at Louisville, the other conference matchup in this one. That's a 3:30 p.m. kickoff at Louisville. And you got Georgia Tech at Wake Forest, 6:30 p.m. kick. And then, of course, North Carolina, at Pittsburgh to wrap up the ACC slate this weekend. That is an 8 p.m. kickoff in the Steel City. So, again, I think we talked about it a little bit off camera. It's not really a super exciting week for the league in terms of matchups for a number of different reasons. To me, the most appealing matchups on here is obviously the Florida State at Clemson is probably after that, North Carolina at Pittsburgh, and it's even a down Pittsburgh team this year. But thoughts on those matchups in particular, because again, just not a super exciting weekend in the ACC. Maybe that's just my opinion, but I'm sticking by that one.
Well, you've got Carolina, FSU, Miami, Duke. So 4 of the 7 3-0 teams are on the road.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it a little bit interesting because crazy stuff happens on the road. And I do think that North Carolina and Florida State are obviously playing very losable games. There's no reason to think that Clemson can't beat Florida State.
No, there's absolutely not. No.
But one of the reasons we do the ACC pod is ultimately the effect of these games on Carolina. And I think the Florida State Clemson game absolutely affects Carolina.
Yes.
If Clemson wins, then that kind of makes the Clemson FSU rematch much more of a reality in Charlotte. Figuring that Clemson will have gotten things righted and they're going to start cruising to the rest of the season, and Florida State's going to do what people think Florida State's going to do. If Florida State wins this game, Clemson's got 2 league losses. So that kind of puts maybe Carolina in a great position. If it takes care of business, it can maybe afford to lose a game, maybe even 2 games, and still get into the ACC title game because it has a head-to-head coming up with Clemson later on in the year. They don't play Florida State. So I think if you're a North Carolina fan, as much as you would like Clemson to be the best possible, when I'm a big fan of rooting for teams that your team plays because you want wins that they accumulate to matter more. In this case, it's a jockeying type thing. So you're still going to get a lot of credibility if you go to Death Valley in November and win. But if you've got some cushion there, you could still maybe go there and lose and still get to the ACC title game, given that they take care of everything else. Mm-hmm. I'm sure Miami fans are thinking the same thing. Louisville fans might be thinking the same thing because they were given the gift of not having to play Clemson, Florida State, or North Carolina. So they like seeing they want somebody to put themselves in a hole. If Clemson wins, neither one of them are in a hole. If FSU wins, Clemson's in a hole. So I think that that's probably a way to look at that game. Georgia Tech at Wake. Carolina does play Georgia Tech later this year. I don't think Carolina fans care about Wake. So you root for Georgia Tech in that one. So they're a little bit stronger when Carolina goes there. NC State at Virginia. I think any loss an ACC team has to Virginia hurts the league.
Yeah.
I think Virginia's really bad.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if they lose to William and Mary to go 0-12. And, maybe State found something offensively last weekend. I know it was VMI, but sometimes you just got to feel good in order to feel good again. So maybe they got that. It'll be interesting. Brennan Armstrong going back to Charlottesville. So if you're a Carolina fan, I know they won't, but root for State because you want State to be as good as possible at the end of the year to make a UNC win more valuable. And the other league game is BC at Louisville. It doesn't really affect Carolina other than if BC springs an upset, then Louisville with its easy conference slate gets themselves into a little bit of a hole. Mm-hmm. So I'm still a believer, though, that if UNC takes care of business, I think UNC is a club that could be in position to go to Charlotte. That'll be enhanced if Clemson loses. And I don't know. I mean, do you think Clemson loses this game? Do you think that this is a pride game? They're not ranked. The passing of the torch type of game? I don't know. I think whatever Clemson has, I think Florida State's going to get it from the Tigers this weekend.
Yeah, I'm conflicted.
I'm not saying Clemson's going to win.
Yeah.
I don't know if they can win that game or if they will, rather. But Clemson's going to be ready to go. That's for sure. Dabo's going to sprint down that hill faster than he ever has.
Oh yeah, no, especially when it's weird because it's kind of like you said, Clemson's kind of going into that game when you look at the rankings, at least, and I don't know what the spread is, but kind of like with an underdog mentality. And that's just such a weird thing to say, especially being at home. And I'm also a little torn on Florida State because I look at what they did against, barely scraping one out against BC, who's not, in my opinion, a very good football team. And it's either, okay, it was Florida State maybe just not as good as everybody thought, or is Florida State kind of that classic, trap game before you're looking ahead a little bit to Clemson. You're not really focusing on this one as much. BC also playing in the red bandana game, 9/11, a little bit of that emotion coming out of it as well. So that could have played a factor. So I'm torn on this game. I really am. But I'm going to be honest with you, AJ. I've got a feeling Clemson wins. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because of what Clemson's done in the past. I don't think Clemson's obviously not as good as they have been. But playing at home, Florida State coming in. I know Florida State had a really impressive win over LSU. That opened the season, though. So, how much can you really take out of that game with that being the season opener, and so much things can change. So I've got a weird feeling Clemson wins this game. But again, if Florida State goes in there with how good I think Florida State can and probably is, wouldn't be surprised if Florida State takes care of business either. But that's a gut feeling only. I have a feeling Clemson wins that one.
I think last week at BC was a human nature game.
100%. Yeah. 100%.
And FSU had a pretty considerable lead for a while, and they took the foot off the brake. And in football, once you take the foot off, it's impossible to get it back on. In basketball, you can get it back on. Football, it's so hard because it's a completely different place you have to be to play at a high level of energy. It's a place that most humans don't go unless you play it on a football field. So I don't think that they were as bad as what the score says. And I just think human nature was a big thing there. That Southern Miss game, Southern Miss is a program that's pretty good enough over the last 30, 35 years that when you beat them the way FSU did, that means a little something. It's like when Syracuse clobbered Western Michigan. I kept saying, that's a good win. You just don't destroy Western Michigan very often. They won at Pitt a couple of years ago, a Pitt team that won the ACC championship with Pickett. Western Michigan beat them in Pittsburgh. So I think FSU is more what we saw the first 2 weeks than what we saw last week.
I think you're right.
Clemson struggled with Charleston Southern, and they got it going against Florida Atlantic. We don't know what Florida Atlantic is.
No, you can't really.
I think Florida State's a better team. I think they're more athletic. Dabo clearly needs to embrace the changes in college football and hit the portal. He's got to do that because he's seeing something, I wouldn't say slip away, but they just don't give off the aura that they did just a couple of years ago. Florida State's starting to give a little bit of that off. I think Florida State goes in there and gets it done. I think their athleticism is huge in this game, and they win a close game. And I think ultimately Carolina might be the benefactor if the Tar Heels can take care of business like they should with the schedule that they have, even though there's going to be some tough spots, this weekend being one. I think Syracuse is pretty solid. Miami could be very good, and Duke could be very good as well, but they get the latter two at home. Actually, they get latter three at home. So their road games in the league they have left are at Pitt, who is grossly underachieving so far, at Georgia Tech, which is in transition, although I think they're slightly improved. And then they've got Clemson and NC State, the games that will determine wherever they end up.
Yeah, it's relatively favorable schedule for the Tar Heels, and they have a really good position to put themselves in a really good position going into that Duke game, followed by obviously Clemson and then State. So we'll see what they can do throughout it. Real quickly, AJ, staying on Carolina, we always do. We always kind of touch on the non-conference games or teams that Carolina has played so far this year. South Carolina, Minnesota, and App State. Looking at their matchups real quickly, South Carolina is at home against Mississippi State, Minnesota at Northwestern this weekend, and then App at Wyoming. Interesting trip for the Mountaineers. Yeah. I think they lose that game. I think it's going to be a tough one. Wyoming obviously beat Texas Tech earlier in the year and hung relatively tough with a really good Texas team last weekend as well. So thoughts real quickly on those three matchups.
Well, I think that South Carolina and Minnesota should win their games. Northwestern's down. And by the way, can we call the Minnesota-Northwestern game the third place game of the 15-501 series?
Yeah, both of those teams.
Since both of them were on 15-501 last week and got throttled. I think the final score was 69-27.
Yeah, I think Duke routed
Something like
Northwestern. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. 38-14 and 31-13. So 69-27.
It's good math.
So they're playing the third place game up in Evanston in front of about 20,000 people. And South Carolina should beat Mississippi State at home. Some people actually thought Mississippi State was going to play with LSU last week, and that didn't happen.
No, they got
South Carolina should win. So that will help UNC. You got to root for the Gamecocks and the Golden Gophers to win. And, you know, App State going out to Wyoming. Wyoming's a good club.
Yeah.
That's a tough place to play. It's a good club. It's probably already be cold now, although I guess the App guys are kind of used to the cold. But
definitely. 100%.
I think that Rocky Mountain cold's a little bit different than the Boone cold.
Yeah.
That club, that would be a good win for App. If they win that game, Wyoming is going to win some games in the Mountain West, which is a solid league. And they've already got one over Texas Tech. They did play with Texas last weekend. So App, I would imagine, is an underdog going out there. And I would pick Wyoming to win that game. But if App goes out there and wins, that helps Carolina a little bit. And honestly, that's one of the games this weekend I'd love to see.
Mm-hmm.
That's a cool trip. If I was covering App, that'd be a cool trip. I want Carolina, Mac, play at Wyoming. I think I already told him to play at Wyoming.
I think we talked about this on the podcast last weekend.
I know. I want to go to Montana.
I'd love to go out there as well.
But that's not realistic. They're not going to play at Montana, but they can play at Wyoming.
Yeah. Oh, that would be awesome. Beautiful campus.
I want to go out there. I want to go out there and cover a game.
That would be awesome. It'd be so different too. I think that'd be fantastic. No, I ditto that. I would love to go out there. But yeah, I think if you'd expect South Carolina to probably win that one based on what we've seen from both of those teams this year. You'd expect Minnesota to beat Northwestern. And if App could go, I think App's the wild card. Like you said, if App goes out to Wyoming, I don't expect them to win, but if they do, that's a big plus for North Carolina because it boosts again that win even more. And especially with App sitting in a pretty good position coming off a not comfortable win over ECU, but ended up scoreline wise, like a little bit more comfortable than it was. So big weekend in terms of that for the Tar Heels as well. Cause we always talk about in this show, we talk about those games because they do matter. They do matter for what Carolina's trying to do this year. You don't want, if all three of if Minnesota, South Carolina and App all lose this weekend, that's a negative for North Carolina because it makes those wins, for the Tar Heels not look as impressive as if they could have. So always kind of pay attention to what those three teams are doing right now. Because again, the better they are, the better it is for North Carolina, especially moving deeper.
I think South Carolina's performance at Athens helped North Carolina, help people
100%.
Look at UNC. And by the way, we don't do Campbell because it's FCS. And
can't look too much into that. Shouldn't even play that game really.
No, they shouldn't play that game at all.
No, it has nothing. It'd be, I guess, a good prep game a little bit, but do you really get a lot out of it, especially late in the year? No. Probably not.
Should play it. Make it the spring game.
Yeah, make it. Yeah, a good point. Make it like an exhibition game. I think we talked about exhibition games. You mentioned Chip Lindsey didn't have an exhibition game in our preview show, and I was sitting there like, well, they should do something. I don't know.
Make it the spring game or make it the second Saturday of fall camp scrimmage, close scrimmage. They do the secret scrimmages.
Agreed.
Secret scrimmages in college basketball. Do it with football too.
Make no sense why they don't do them. I don't get it, but that's another podcast topic for another day. But AJ, that's going to do it for this week in the ACC. A little bit shorter of an episode. Again, not the most exciting weekend in the league in terms of matchups, but North Carolina does have an exciting one against Pittsburgh. And I'm seeing it right here, AJ. Tickets as low as $14 for that game. So I think that might tell you all you need to know about the crowd right now. Yep. Tickets as low as $14 for that matchup. So if you're thinking about getting a ticket,
$14. I talked about this in three things here tonight. It's worth $14 just to go to one of the concourse.
Yeah, just walk on the concourse
and see all the Pittsburgh Steelers history there. The museum is essentially the concourse. It's 100%. Awesome.
Yeah.
I was telling a young reporter the other day after Mac to go up there and make sure, or yesterday, and he said, "Well, I'm a Ravens fan. I don't like either team. I don't like the Steelers, but it's pretty cool to see all that stuff because it's sports history. It's big time sports history. So
it's massive, beautiful.
It's worth $14. It's worth $14 just to tour the stadium.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And by the way, we haven't done this before. We should have done this on the football show. By the time this pod comes out, I guess they will all what's the uniform reveal? I think they go Stormtrooper.
Yeah, it's a good one. I do like that. Yeah. They usually release that on Thursday or Friday. They release that.
Nighttime, grass field, pit going yellow, blue, yellow. The Stormtrooper looked pretty good up there.
I think that's probably what they'll do.
They've been wearing navy blue pants up there a lot.
They do that. It's either going to be that or I think it's white Carolina blue pants. That they've wore that combo on the road a good amount of times too. I could see that.
I'm not a big white helmet guy. And if you're going to do Stormtrooper, you do it once a year. Mm-hmm. I think Stormtrooper at night on the grass field, that way it gets real dirty.
I even think the Stormtrooper with the blue helmet would look sweet too. Just make it pop a little bit more.
Well, I know that's my favorite uniform.
That's a good looking combo right there. And Carolina has not had the most success in the Stormtrooper uniforms, if I remember correctly. I think they have. I don't think that's a fan favorite. I think it looks good, but I don't think if you look at the records they've had in those all whites, I don't think it's great.
They lost at Georgia Tech in it. They lost at Wake in it.
They had some duds in those uniforms, just bad performances. Georgia Tech and Wake, they didn't really show up in those games, really, especially that Georgia Tech game. There's more there too. Don't get that.
Remember when Roy used to say buildings don't win games? Well, uniforms don't win games, and they don't bring in recruits either for the most part. So
no, they really don't. They might have a 0.01% difference, but
I'm predicting. This is good. When people watch this, it'll already be out. So we both could be wrong, or one of us could be wrong. I'm predicting straight Stormtrooper, all white.
Okay. I'll switch it up. Blue, white, blue helmet, white shirt. And
so we both agree that it's white on white.
White breeches, I think is what they
call it.
White
breeches, yeah. But on grass, I'm a big get the uniform dirty guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's one thing we miss too much in college football now with everybody playing on the fake crap. Not enough dirty uniforms. I want dirty uniforms.
I want grass fields. Bring back grass fields. It's been in the conversation on the NFL with injuries. Yeah. And I've always said I'll give you. I'm a little just to go off on a tangent real quick. I'm a massive soccer fan, football fan. If you're talking about European soccer, but in Europe, and I've told you this story before, in the big Europe leagues like Premier League, La Liga, whatever you want to look into. They do not play on turf. They will not play on turf. For instance, sometimes, a big, European team will go play maybe a smaller team in a European competition. If that field is on turf, they will not play that game usually. They will move it to another stadium. Turf, when it comes to European soccer, is like a no-no. None of the big teams have it. It's not allowed. And it's different in soccer because of the ball and everything, but a lot of it also has to do with just injuries. It's turf is just not really what you want to be playing on, especially in a sport like football where you're getting thrown all over the place all the time. So bring back grass fields. I want grass back in Keenan. It looks great. The turf really pops, looks really nice. But let's bring back grass, man. I just think for me, it's a no-brainer. I'm over the turf phenomenon. I'm selling turf this week. Don't need it anymore.
When a lot of times throughout the many years I've been doing this for a living, you get to talk to players right after games in football, and sometimes they'll still have their pants on with the pads and everything and just have the undershirt. They won't have the jersey on, and you could smell the field on them.
Yeah. And now you just smell rubber beads.
Takes me back. And I know this is really weird. People go, my God, he's talking about smelling football players. What the hell is wrong with this guy? But it takes me back. It takes me back, and I love it. And that's the way they're supposed to smell.
I know what you're talking about too.
They're supposed to smell like grass and sweat and blood and snot and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But they smell different after playing on the fake stuff than they do on grass.
I can relate to that because me growing up, I played varsity soccer.
People are worried about me now. There are people
no.
about me now.
But I'll say I agree because I played soccer growing up, and when I played high school, we played predominantly on grass. And I remember that kind of smell of even warming up. You smell the grass in the fall; it smells different. But for club soccer, a lot of our practices and games were more often on turf. And there's just only thing I remember about playing on turf was just having 6 million of those black beads in my shoes after games or in my pants and in my. I'd bring back grass, man.
Yeah, again, it looks
in
baseball. Cool, no. When I played baseball, the smell of freshly cut outfield, because I usually played center field, that's a smell that's embedded forever. Mm-hmm. And then in basketball, the smell of the leather ball sometimes if they're fairly new
there's
ball,
some things, but it's not the same.
But it's not the same. Football though. Football, you have to smell mud, grass, sweat.
Yeah, you want a little grass. You want a little grass in your helmet, kind of poking out. A couple grass
teammate come over and you don't know it. Teammate in the huddle, pull it out of your
100%
and stuff.
That's what you want.
I had to play one time. I had to play one time in a mud game where because I had braces in middle school and my first year of high school. So I had one of those, I didn't have a mouthpiece that was connected to my face mask.
Yeah.
I had it was like round and I would fold it and put it in my mouth. And I don't know, I missed a block, I'm sure. And fell face first. It's just nasty as you know what. And my mouthpiece came out of my mouth and went into a mud pile.
Ugh.
And my uniform was gross. And I got up and we went to the huddle. We didn't do no huddle stuff back then. Went to the huddle. I had no place to wipe it off. So I grabbed the corner of my shirt here. I'm trying to wipe it off as best I can. I spit on it. I'm flicking it. I had to stick it back in my mouth for the next play.
Oof.
That's what football fields should be like.
Yeah, 100%. That's football.
NFL films like the 70s. I mean, I don't think teams should play on baseball fields, but as a kid, I loved it. Whenever a football game was played on an MLB field,
kind of cool, yeah.
The Major League Baseball season, you wanted it to rain.
Yeah, get all muddy,
just
and
a
nasty.
Mud bath.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Let's bring grass fields back. Take anything from this podcast.
Grass fields, mud, and dirty uniforms. If you like that, let us know. If you're still watching, let us know on Twitter, on our boards. Let us know if you want dirty uniforms back in football.
Yeah, or just like the video below too. And if you think it's kind of a weekend for the ACC in terms of exciting national matchups that catch the attention of your casual fans, like guys who follow North Carolina, don't have time to watch the rest of the ACC all the time, like this video below as well.
I think FSU Clemson makes up for it.
That's a good matchup. Besides that,
and maybe that's a good game to have when the rest of the games are not
exactly
eyebrow raisers.
Surprised it's a noon kickoff, but
I think in August we look at Pitt at North Carolina at night. Let's say if we knew the start times, FSU or Clemson at noon, Pitt at North Carolina at night, or North Carolina at Pitt at night. That's a pretty good way to bookend your day.
Yeah, if you're talking start to finish.
And I still think it is. Because you're going to get a better Pitt team, and North Carolina's still in the, ascension process.
Yeah,
they're ascending.
That's a good word.
So we'll see how much they ascend this weekend.
Yeah,
as we're back on football. But I still want the dirty uniform comments.
Yeah, let us know, guys. We want to hear from you guys.
I'm all about it.
Yeah, me too. It's been a hot topic in NFL, and I've said for years it's just I think turf looks cool, but that's about the only positive it has for me. So bring back grass fields, no brainer for me. Hopefully we'll get that rolling, and I'm sure the higher ups at Carolina are just taking my opinion and being like, yeah, you know what, Jake's right, man. AJ's right. Let's bring back turf. Let's bring back let's bring back grass.
I'm sure the next emergency board of trustees meeting won't be about Tez Walker. It'll be
the clip. Yeah, they'll play the clip.
Jacob Turner got me thinking.
Yeah. They'll play the clip on the PowerPoint, the big jumbotron. Play the clip when we're talking about it. Yeah, Mac will hear it. And Mac's idea to go to turf anyway. We're going off on a real tangent here, so maybe he's the one we need to talk to him. Like Mac,
he ain't changing.
He ain't changing that, is he? No way at all. But again, we'll get the heck out of here because we've derailed this podcast massively. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Big thank you to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this podcast. Always, happy to have them on board, and long may that partnership continue. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell as well, so you know every single time we upload. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.